You know how some moments split your life in two? For me, it was a business dinner, one of those sleek, high-stakes setups in a boutique hotel just off Market Street. I was there for Jenna. She was the star, Jenna Brooks, head of strategic partnerships at a rising fintech, dressed like she could own the room or sell it back to the hotel by dessert. Her hair was perfect, lips sharp red, and she'd chosen a tailored off-shoulder dress that made her look less like a wife and more like an advertisement for success. Not that I was complaining. She was magnetic, as always. The evening had been running smoothly. A dozen investors, mostly coastal types, Stanford alums, early crypto money, second-wave tech guys now looking for sustainable plays. I'd been in finance long enough to spot the types. One-up smiles, Cartier watches worn tight, calculated interest in every answer. They weren't here to be impressed. They were here to be reassured. Jenna was doing exactly that. Pitching like a pro, keeping it casual, smart, just edgy enough to make them feel like they were early to something big. I chimed in here and there, numbers guy, background support, the husband who understands but doesn't overshadow. That's the role I'd learned to play over the last 3 years. She liked it that way. Things shifted over dessert. We just finished some artisan chocolate dish I couldn't pronounce when a waiter, young guy, probably a trainee, walked back to our private table and leaned in toward Jenna with a discreet smile. "Ma'am, you left this in the ladies' room." He handed her a clutch. Hers? Black, textured leather with the little gold initials she had monogrammed after our second anniversary. She reached for it without breaking stride in her conversation with the hedge fund manager across from her. But when she opened the clasp, something fell out. Not just fell. Slipped like it wanted to be seen. A hotel key card. White, with the silver Vitali logo and a room number in fine black print. Suite 412. And then, as if it had planned its entrance, 2 breakfast vouchers followed, fluttering like a slow-motion betrayal across the white linen. Hotel Vitali. Breakfast for 2 guests. Valid. Today. Time didn't freeze. It didn't have to. The air in the room just changed. Dense. Awkward. Some primal hush took over. You could hear the scrape of a fork dropped 2 tables away. People looked. Heads turned. I saw one of the investors blink too fast. Another reached for his water and didn't sip it. And just as Jenna picked up the key card, smooth as always, her smartwatch lit up on her wrist. Suite 412. Ready. 2 guests. Her hand hesitated just for half a second. Just enough for me to see it. She looked down, then back up with a manufactured grin. "Oh my God," she said, laughing lightly, holding the key card up like it was a raffle prize. "Okay, this is too much. Someone from my team thinks they're hilarious." She turned to the guy across the table. Daniel, I think his name was, head of a seed fund in Palo Alto, and added, "We've been finalizing a rewards integration with Vitali this month. They've been setting up sample stays, test alerts, all that." Her voice stayed warm, upbeat, friendly, like nothing out of place had happened. She gestured toward the vouchers. "We were literally just talking about UX misfires in loyalty tech, right? Classic example. Imagine this happening to a real customer." A few people chuckled. Not convincingly. She kept going. "Also, I'll need to have a talk with my interns. That Suite 412 bit is dramatic even by their standards." She leaned back in her chair, then added with a wink, though I guess it worked. "Got your attention." Everyone was silent, eyes still flicking between me and the table. She looked at me then, as if she hadn't just tried to brush off a loaded keycard and timed hotel alert. She reached out and touched my arm. "Adam, you all right?" Her smile was soft, performative. "You look like someone ran over your dog. Don't let them think you're this easy to rattle." I said nothing. She squeezed my arm again, eyes darting around the table. "He's always like this when things go off script. He thinks we live inside a spreadsheet." And just like that, the room shifted. Again. But not the way she wanted. One of the VCs, James, a quiet guy from Menlo Park, offered a polite excuse. "I should probably head out, actually. Early flight." He stood up, signaling the start of the unravel. Another executive, a woman from a crypto-adjacent fund, smiled sympathetically at Jenna, nodded at me and said, "We'll be in touch." appreciate the dinner. The chairs started moving. Napkins folded. Phones checked. Conversations turned stilted, then stopped altogether. I didn't move. Jenna kept the performance going, transitioning seamlessly into goodbyes and laughter. She even joked with the waiter who returned, saying, "You might have just cost me a term sheet," as if his delivering her clutch was the root of the issue. She looked perfect still, effortless, calm, even amused. But I noticed it then just for a flash. The twitch in her temple. The barely masked panic in her eyes when no one was laughing along. She knew. I saw the shift behind her smile, from damage control to redirection. From explanation to attack. Because after everyone left, when it was just the two of us at the table, Jenna leaned in, still holding the keycard like it was an inside joke between us. "Are you seriously going to make a thing out of this?" I stared at her. "Adam," she said, almost laughing. "It's obviously a mix-up. Jesus, you looked like you were about to throw a chair. You made it 10 times worse." I shook my head slowly, but still didn't speak. "You know what? That's the real problem. You don't trust me. That's why they left. Not the card. It's how you reacted. Like a wounded golden retriever in front of a room full of sharks. Still nothing from me." "You always do this," she said, gathering her things. "You spiral. You invent drama. That's why you hate my job, hate my hours, hate my coworkers. But God forbid I ever say you're the problem." I just sat there. "I'm going home," she said, standing up. "You can stay and sulk. Or you can grow up and come with me." She walked out without looking back. I stayed seated for another 15 minutes, staring at the white tablecloth. The vouchers were still there. So was the key card. Suite 412. Ready. 2 guests. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't an intern prank. And for the first time, I couldn't pretend I didn't see what was right in front of me. The story had changed. I just wasn't sure yet how much. The drive home felt like gliding underwater. Headlights glowing, streets shifting past the windshield like shadows on glass. I didn't say a word. Didn't turn on the radio. Just let the silence press in as Jenna scrolled through her phone in the passenger seat. Thumbs moving with casual speed. Face lit up by the screen like none of this had happened. I don't know what I expected. A confession? An apology? Maybe even defiance, something at least real. But instead, she just sat there tapping messages to someone I didn't ask about, someone she didn't offer. And I couldn't bring myself to ask. Not yet. Instead, I did what I hadn't allowed myself to do in months. I started replaying things. All of them. Every strange turn. Every odd look. Every loose thread I'd pulled half-heartedly, and then let go of because it was easier not to know. It started with the little things. The first one I remembered was her ring. She had this habit, subtle, easy to miss, of forgetting her wedding ring on days she dressed up. At first, I chalked it up to comfort. It's not unusual. Hands swell, jewelry pinches, some fabric snag. But I started noticing a pattern. She'd wear it when we were together, brunches, errands, casual evenings in. But on days she had big meetings or networking events, it stayed on her dresser. One time, I even asked, half joking, "Going single today?" And she just laughed and kissed me on the cheek. No explanation. Then there was her phone. Jenna used to be one of those people who dropped her phone anywhere. Kitchen counter, couch cushions, passenger seat, even the bathroom sink once. But somewhere along the line it changed. Subtly. Her phone started living face down. Always. No matter where we were. Restaurants, the gym, the house, screen down, always out of sight. I noticed, sure. But I didn't say anything. I figured everyone got more private at some point. Work stress, overexposure. It felt petty to question. I thought of the night her location sharing suddenly turned off. We used to have it on. Not because either of us was clingy, but because it was convenient. Coordinating pickups, checking traffic, the usual stuff. One night, I went to check how far she was from home. She'd said she was coming back from a late meeting, and instead of her little avatar moving across the map, I saw a blank gray screen. Location not available. I remember texting her, "Hey, did you turn off your location?" She replied 5 minutes later. "Oh, weird, probably a glitch." "We'll fix later." She never did. I didn't push it. Then came the girls' nights. First, they made sense. Jenna was always social, and after the pandemic years, she said she missed being out. Real bars, real people, real drinks. But the frequency picked up, and the timing got strange. Thursday nights, Sunday evenings, even the occasional Monday wine thing. She started getting home later. Not trashed, just polished. Like she'd practiced being casual. The receipts told their own story. Once, I checked the joint account out of habit. A handful of charges for bar tabs under women's names, but always in places where she said she wasn't. Once she said she was at a rooftop downtown. The charge came from a whiskey lounge in the Castro. Another time, she said they just grabbed dinner, but the bill included bottle service. I remember asking her once, "Do you guys ever just hang out at someone's place?" She shrugged. "What's the fun in that?" It wasn't just bars. It was clothes too. Dresses I hadn't seen before. Perfumes that didn't match the ones on her nightstand. I noticed a new scent one night, something warm and musky, and when I leaned in and said, "This one's new," she blinked and said, "It's just laundry detergent." I let it go, but I didn't forget the way she said it. Then there were her work meetings. They started small, push dinners, late calls, but grew into full evenings away. She'd say things like, "Don't wait up, it might run late." Or, "I'll be with the team, we're finalizing the quarterly roadmap." And yet she never brought her laptop. I'd ask, "Don't you need your charger?" And she'd wave me off. It's mostly just discussion. One night, she came home past midnight. Hair windblown, shoes in hand, blazer missing. She said the taxi took the long way back. I nodded, even though I already knew from the app that she'd been dropped off 2 blocks from where she said she'd been. I wanted to believe it was just a mistake. Maybe she got out early. Maybe the driver misrouted. Maybe. One too many maybes. But there was one moment that stood out, the one I'd tried hardest to forget. It was a Tuesday, maybe 6 weeks before the dinner. Jenna said she'd be staying at her sister's place in Oakland. Family stuff, she said. Her niece had a school project, and she promised to help. I thought nothing of it, until I drove out to drop off a charger she'd forgotten. And the house was dark. Dead dark. No car in the driveway. No porch light. I texted her, no answer. I waited across the street for 10 minutes, watched the house. Nothing. Then I left the charger at the door, took a photo, and went home. The next morning, she sent me a photo of herself and her niece, clearly taken that morning. Different clothes, different light, staged. I didn't say a word. I started noticing ride receipts. She used to take public transit or the occasional Uber, but now there were frequent charges that all ended near the same street in the Mission. I looked it up once. The address matched a condo block near where her project manager, Marcus, lived. She'd mentioned him before, said he was annoying, loud, and always late to calls. One night I asked, "Isn't Marcus on that project you hate?" She said, "He is, but at least he makes work bearable." She smiled when she said it. I pretended not to see. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. That stress was making me see patterns where none existed. That maybe I was insecure, or tired, or just craving more closeness than she had to give. But after the dinner, all of it started rewiring itself in my head. All the excuses, all the "you're overthinking" dismissals. Every time I let her brush things off with a kiss or a joke. They weren't scattered dots anymore. They were a pattern, a grid, a map. I pulled into our driveway. The porch light flickered on. She didn't wait for me, just got out of the car, walked up the steps, and disappeared inside without looking back. I sat in the car, engine ticking down, fingers still gripping the wheel. I thought about how many times I had explained away the gut feelings. How many nights I convinced myself that loving someone meant not asking too many questions. That protecting the relationship meant absorbing whatever didn't make sense. But what I'd really done was silence myself, one ignored instinct at a time. I finally turned off the ignition. The house looked the same. Quiet, clean, normal. But I wasn't fooled anymore. The next morning felt like a hangover without alcohol. My head was heavy, my eyes dry. Jenna left early. A quick kiss on the cheek that landed more like a formality than affection. "I've got a meeting downtown," she said, her tone light, distracted. "Don't wait for me for lunch." Then she was gone, heels clicking down the hall, door shutting like a gavel. I stood in the kitchen, staring at my coffee. The smell was sharp but lifeless. Everything in our house felt staged, like a showroom of the life we were supposed to have. Photos from vacations, mugs with cute slogans, her jackets on hooks, props for a play I no longer believed in. I'd been avoiding the obvious. For months, I'd been assembling shadows, hunches, circumstantial scraps. Patterns, yes, but not proof. Not something I could hold in my hand and say, "This is real. This happened." Last night had burned through my denial, but it still left me in a fog. I needed more than intuition. I needed the truth stripped of performance. The laptop was still on the dining table. She'd left it open, logged in. A careless mistake or quiet arrogance. I couldn't tell which. Her lock screen was a photo of us from 2 summers ago at Lake Tahoe. We were smiling, wind in our hair, sunglasses on. Looking at it felt like watching ghosts. I sat down and stared at the trackpad. My fingers hovered. For years I'd told myself I'd never invade her privacy, that even suspicion didn't give me the right. But suspicion had already consumed me. It had eaten through my sleep, my appetite, my sense of self. If trust was dead, what was left to protect? I opened the browser. Her email was still logged in. A neat, professional inbox. Work threads, newsletters, calendar invites. Harmless at first glance. I scrolled again. Nothing obvious. Then I noticed the travel folder. She'd never had that before. Inside, a single booking confirmation. Hotel Vitale, Suite 412. Jenna Brooks, 2 guests. Paid with our joint card. Date: yesterday. I clicked it. There it was in black and white. Check-in time, confirmation number, amenities for 2. Breakfast vouchers, late checkout, champagne on arrival. It didn't even pretend to be businesslike. This wasn't a slip-up. This was deliberate. My chest felt tight, but I kept going. Her photo app was open in another tab. I clicked on the shared album we used for vacations. Buried under a string of work *TS was a cluster of images uploaded late last night. At first, just objects, a wine glass on a marble table, a hotel balcony view of the Bay Bridge at sunset. Then a picture of the room itself. Soft gray walls, a velvet chair. And on that chair, a man's blazer. Not mine. Another photo, 2 glasses on a tray. One with a faint lipstick mark, her shade, deep rose. The other clean. A third photo. The doorplate with Suite 412 etched into polished brass. And then, like a final blow, Jenna herself. She'd taken a mirror *T, angled from the neck down, wearing the same dress she wore to the investor dinner. Hand holding her phone. A champagne flute balanced in the other. In the background, the reflection of a second figure, blurred but unmistakably male. I leaned back, staring at the screen. Felt like falling but staying upright. My hands were cold. My heart wasn't pounding like I expected. It was steady, numb. This wasn't suspicion. This wasn't a bad feeling or a misread signal. This was the truth. The story she tried to spin, interns, glitches, pranks, evaporated like steam. In its place was a ledger of actions, receipts, images. Undeniable. I clicked through more tabs. Her calendar showed a team strategy session. At the same time, the hotel booking began. Her credit card statement showed Uber rides from our house to the hotel and back. Her fitness app, still synced to our shared dashboard, logged steps at that address. All of it lined up. Clean, efficient, planned. I remembered her laughter at the dinner. The way she redirected the room turned me into the punchline. How easily she'd done it. That wasn't improvisation. That was practice. I didn't yell. Didn't slam the laptop shut. I just sat there, fingers resting on the trackpad, the screen casting pale light on my hands. It felt like looking at evidence from a crime I hadn't realized was mine. The strangest part was how quiet my mind felt. For months, it had been a swarm of questions. Is she lying? Am I overreacting? Am I losing her or losing my mind? Now, there was nothing left to ask. The answer was right there. She had chosen someone else. She had chosen to build a second life inside ours. I opened a blank document and began typing. Date, time, details. Hotel Vitali confirmation number. Screensh *TS of the photos. Her Uber receipts. Her fitness tracker location. One by one, I saved them in a folder labeled Suite 412. I didn't know why I was doing it. Habit, maybe, or survival. Some part of me knew that if I didn't capture it now, she'd erase it later, and with it, my ability to tell myself the truth. When I finished, I closed the laptop slowly. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Outside, a delivery truck idled and drove off. Everything looked normal, but it wasn't. It would never be again. I stood up and walked to the window. From here, I could see the bay faintly between buildings. The morning light was thin and gray, the kind that makes everything look colder. People were out there starting their day, coffee in hand, calls in their ears, plans ahead. Normal lives, ordinary lives, lives where you come home to someone you trust. I touched the glass. It was cool. For years, I'd thought of our marriage as a fortress. Not perfect, but solid. Built on history, habits, routines. I'd believed that if cracks formed, they could be patched. That love was a kind of insurance against erosion. But fortresses can hide invaders as easily as they keep them out. I turned from the window, my eyes landing on the framed photo of us in Tahoe on the entry table. Our faces beamed at me, strangers who didn't know what was coming. I almost wanted to tell them, don't be so sure of her smile. Don't ignore the small lies. Don't mistake your silence for strength. But I couldn't go back. I could only stand here in the present, holding a truth I hadn't wanted to find. The evidence was clear. What I did with it, that was still unwritten. I didn't confront her. Not that day. Not the next. Not when she came home with sushi and kissed my cheek like we were fine. Not when she pulled off her heels, dropped her blazer on the couch, and laughed at something on her phone. I watched it all like someone stuck behind glass. Not angry, not numb, but strangely focused, observing. It wasn't a choice exactly, more like an instinct. If I said something now, she'd spin it. She'd twist, gaslight, misdirect, turn the truth into confusion. I'd seen her do it 100 times in work meetings, at family dinners, even with me. Facts became fog when she was cornered. So I didn't corner her. Instead, I started fading out. It began with the small things. I stopped replying to her casual texts. The ones that said, heading home soon? Or, do we need eggs? I left them unread, as if I hadn't seen them. When she asked, I'd say the service was bad or I must have missed the notification. That was believable. I'd always been the forgetful one. She didn't press. I stopped doing the little favors she never noticed until they were gone. No more filling up her gas tank on Sunday nights. No more replacing the toothpaste or restocking her favorite oat milk. When the paper towels ran out, they stayed out. When her car's tire pressure light blinked on, I didn't mention it. She got irritated, muttered things like, "Do I have to do everything around here?" And I just nodded. I started sleeping later. Not enough to draw attention, just enough to miss breakfast together. She'd say, "You okay? You've been tired lately." And I'd mumble something about work. I stopped reaching for her in bed. Stopped asking about her day. I didn't give her anything to fight against. No arguments, no accusations, no emotional scenes. I just let the distance stretch. She didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did and didn't want to poke it. That's the thing about betrayal. When people think they've gotten away with it, they get comfortable. They confuse your silence for safety. In the evenings, I started driving. Not far. Sometimes just to the other side of town, sometimes to Point Reyes, where the water stretches wide and the sky doesn't ask questions. I parked along the cliffs, cracked the window, and let the cold air fill the car. That's where I started writing. Not like journaling. This wasn't about healing. It was about remembering. About building a map backward, connecting all the red flags I'd ignored. I wrote it all down in a lined notebook Jenna had given me years ago. Back when we thought matching stationery sets were romantic. Every lie, every excuse, every offhand comment that used to confuse me but now made perfect sense. Like the night she said she had a spontaneous happy hour that went 4 hours long and came back smelling like hotel soap. Or the time she said her Uber driver took a wrong turn and dropped her on the wrong street, but couldn't explain why the receipt showed a direct route to the same block where her project manager lived. I listed names, times, addresses. I printed **TS, her hotel booking, her watch notification, the photo of her in suite 412. I taped them into the pages like a case file. It wasn't for court. I didn't know if I'd ever use it for anything. I just needed something physical to hold on to, something that told me I wasn't crazy. Because for months, I had been gaslit without even realizing it. I'd felt it in my bones. The gut tightness, the self-doubt, the constant suspicion I kept telling myself was insecurity. I had been conditioned to mistrust my own instincts because she never explicitly lied. She just buried the truth under layers of plausible deniability. I went back through our shared calendar and started marking days she said she was at her sister's house. Then I drove by that house and took photos of the empty driveway, the dark windows. I matched them to timestamps from her fitness tracker and bank transactions. One night she swore she stayed in because she was burned out, but I found a parking receipt in her coat pocket from a garage 2 blocks from Hotel Vitali. I archived her texts, took screen recordings of her typing then deleting mid-reply, logged the times she said she was stuck in traffic, but was already out of the city. I even found an old Valentine's card in the trash that had never been given to me, addressed but unsigned. It had been folded and unfolded multiple times. There was a faint imprint of a name on the back. Not mine. I became my own private investigator. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed clarity. I had to know exactly when it happened, when we ended and whatever this began. And the answer wasn't clean. It didn't start with a kiss or a hotel suite. It started with silences, with skipped details, with the slow, quiet unraveling of connection. I started to realize that the betrayal didn't begin when she checked into a hotel room with another man. It began the moment she decided I didn't need to know. The moment she chose performance over honesty. The moment I became a background character in my own marriage. I kept writing, sometimes at 2 a.m., in the parked car with only the dashboard light and the sound of foghorns in the distance. Other times during lunch breaks, in my office with the blinds drawn. Felt obsessive. Maybe it was. But there was something therapeutic in turning pain into record, in not letting it evaporate. At home, I became invisible. Or maybe she just didn't want to see me. She kept up appearances. She made pasta, watched her shows, even asked if I wanted to go to a concert sometime in October. I said maybe, but she knew something was shifting. I saw it in the way her eyes lingered on me when she thought I wasn't looking. The way she'd pause at the doorway, like she wanted to ask me something but couldn't find the words. Her instincts were catching up to the truth. That I wasn't angry. I was gone. I wasn't plotting. I wasn't packing. I wasn't leaving in a blaze. I was doing something worse, something irreversible. I was documenting, not just her lies, but my own disappearance. Because when you spend months forgiving what you're not even sure is happening, you lose parts of yourself. You shrink. You second guess. You trade in your voice for peace. And one day you realize you're fluent in pretending. I didn't want that anymore. One night, I left early from work, drove to the bay, and sat on a bench watching the boats. I pulled out my notebook, flipped to the middle, and made a new section. Before and after. Before, she texted me good morning. After, she stopped. Before, I filled her tank on Saturdays. After, she switched to Lyft. Before, she wore my hoodie. After, it stayed folded in the closet for months. The list went on. And as I wrote, I realized something. I wasn't just building a record of what she did. I was writing a eulogy for the man I had been. The man who defended her to everyone. The man who blamed himself for her distance. The man who believed loyalty was louder than suspicion. That man was gone now. And the silence I left behind was the only proof she'd ever get that I had changed. There's a certain calm that comes after the storm. Not because things have gotten better, but because the noise has burned itself out. That's what it felt like in the days that followed. Not peace, just quiet. An eerie stillness in my head where the chaos used to be. I stopped writing for a while. Not because I was finished, but because I knew what came next. Preparation. If I was going to leave, really leave, I couldn't do it emotionally. I had to do it methodically, the way you defuse a bomb. One wire at a time. First, the money. Jenna and I had a shared checking account, the kind you open as a gesture of unity in the early days. Back when love was still loud. I rerouted my paycheck into a new private account. Took about 20 minutes online. I didn't close the joint one. That would have raised flags. I just stopped feeding it. Quietly, cleanly. Next, I froze the secondary cards. Not the ones she used daily, I let those stay active. But the extras, the ones we kept in the drawer, just in case. I submitted a report that they were lost. The replacements came to my office. She never noticed. I scheduled a change of address for my sensitive mail. Credit reports, tax documents, my subscription to that financial journal she always said made me sound 40. It all went to a P.O. box in Oakland now. Just in case. I started working from home less. Told her the office needed more presence. She didn't ask questions. She liked the space. Or maybe she liked having the house to herself. Either way, it worked. What she didn't know was that I was scouting. I found a small loft in Jack London Square. Bare walls, exposed brick, one big window facing the port. Smelled like wood and dust. I signed the lease under my full legal name, not the shortened version she always teased me about. Something about that felt symbolic. After that, it became about timing. I learned her schedule like a detective. I already knew the lies, the meetings, the girls' nights, the out-of-town strategy offsites. Now I used them. If she said she'd be gone overnight, I knew I had 12 hours. If she left her gym bag at the door, I had 90 minutes. That's when I started moving things. Not everything. Not enough to leave a vacuum. Just the pieces that mattered. My documents. A few books. The watch my father gave me. My passport. Flash drives. Spare keys. A box of old letters from my grandmother she never knew I kept. Gone. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did, but was too preoccupied maintaining her version of normal to say anything. In the meantime, I left her a gift. Inside her favorite book, The Night Circus, the one she rereads every autumn like it's a ritual. I slid an envelope between pages 112 and 113. It held no note, no explanation, just three things: a printed confirmation of her Suite 412 booking, a receipt with her signature, and a QR code linking to a hashed album of the photos from her shared drive. The images were compressed into one clean PDF, date-stamped and logged. I didn't expect her to find it right away. I wasn't leaving it for now. I was leaving it for later, when the questions started, when the denial ran out, when the mirror refused to lie. Elsewhere, I planted other mirrors. I pulled GPS data from her smartwatch, a model I had bought her, ironically, for safety. It logged every location she'd worked out in over the past 6 months. Only most of those late-night runs didn't lead to a gym. They led to the same hotel zone, the same blocks, over and over. I exported it into a simple timeline. Just a string of dates, times, and coordinates. I highlighted the ones that matched her alibis. Working late, team dinner, spa night with Madison. They all ended at the same intersection. She was predictable, not even careful, just confident I'd never look. I saved it all on a USB drive labeled only with the date I planned to leave. In the meantime, I practiced being invisible. I smiled when she told me about her day. I laughed at the shows she played in the background while scrolling through her phone. I responded to her texts. I kept up the illusion because I didn't want to explode. I wanted to evaporate. There's a difference. Exploding leaves debris. Evaporating leaves questions. She started noticing in her own way. "You've been different," she said one night, curling into the couch beside me, wine in hand. Not in a bad way, just quieter. I nodded. "Been tired." She tilted her head. Work? Something like that. She paused, looked like she might dig deeper. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, smiled faintly, typed something back, and didn't ask again. That's how I knew it was working. The more I said less, the more she leaned into her version of reality. One where I was tired, distracted, fading for reasons unrelated to her. That's what she needed to believe, that whatever was shifting, she wasn't at the center of it. It bought me time and clarity. I stopped reacting altogether. The day she came home smelling like cologne and cheap hotel soap, I didn't flinch. When she took a call in the bathroom with the water running, I didn't listen. When she forgot our dinner reservation and said, "Oh my God, was that tonight?" I smiled and said, "No worries," because it wasn't. Not anymore. This wasn't our life. It was hers, and I had simply been standing too close to notice. The silence became louder than any confrontation I could have launched. And I started to see it in her. The unease, the sideways glances, the half-started sentences. She didn't know what had changed, but she felt it. That's the cruel symmetry of cheating. The betrayer never expects the betrayed to leave quietly. They expect rage, accusations, drama. They prepare for war. They never prepare for silence. And that's what I gave her. One night, she stood in the kitchen a little longer than usual after dinner. We weren't talking, just existing in parallel. She turned to me and said, "Hey, are we okay?" I looked up from my glass and met her eyes. "Why wouldn't we be?" She blinked. "I don't know. You've just been different." "Do you want me to be different?" She hesitated. "I didn't say that." I smiled. "Then we're fine." She didn't bring it up again. That weekend, I stayed late at the co-working space near the loft. I left a toothbrush in the bathroom drawer, bought a small kettle, hung a map of the bay on the wall. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I started sleeping there once or twice a week, under the excuse of late meetings. Jenna didn't ask questions. She said, "Enjoy the silence," like it was a joke. She had no idea how prophetic that was. And that was the week I made the final change. I opened her calendar, still synced on our joint tablet. Saw her note for the upcoming off-site team building. 3 nights in Sonoma. Wine, workshops, wellness. She'd even added a little emoji in the title. That's when I scheduled the move. 3 days. 1 suitcase. 1 file. The file was a spreadsheet. Plain, minimal. 1 column of dates. 1 of transactions. 1 of GPS routes. It didn't say, "I know." It didn't scream. It just laid out the truth line by line. A mirror, clean and cold. I labeled the file. Exit_timeline_final. XLS. And on the vanity in our bedroom, the one cluttered with her perfumes and lipsticks and detangling sprays, I left 2 things. My copy of the apartment key and a USB drive. Ironically, the investors reached out, not upset by the hotel slip, but by Jenna mocking me. They liked my composure, offered me a director role across the bay. Her betrayal gave me an exit. I timed my move with her off-site, packed a bag, left the key and a USB ledger on her vanity. No words, just the facts, just my absence. I left with 2 bags and no goodbye. Days blurred into quiet rhythm. Morning runs, remote work, late dinners alone. Then I met Emma, a photographer. We talked like old friends. No pressure, no performance. I didn't destroy Jenna's world. I simply walked out of it. And for once, I felt real again. Not betrayed, not broken, just free.